If you've ever searched for how to be more productive and motivated, you've probably been given the same advice. Work harder, push through resistance, be more disciplined. But for many people, the harder they try to force productivity, the harder it becomes to actually start the work. Important tasks feel heavy, motivation disappears, and the gap between what you want to do and what you actually do gets wider. So the question becomes, why does productivity feel so difficult sometimes? And more importantly, how can you become more productive and motivated without forcing yourself through constant pressure? Because motivation isn't something you create through discipline. Motivation is something that appears when the brain believes the work is safe enough to engage with. In this video, I'm going to show you why productivity often collapses under pressure and how to rebuild motivation in a way that works with your brain instead of against it. Most productivity advice assumes something very simple. If you want to get more done, you just need more motivation. And if motivation is missing, you should apply discipline. But this assumption ignores something important about how the brain actually works. Your brain has not primarily evolved to maximize productivity. Your brain has evolved to protect you from risk. And every time you approach a task, your nervous system evaluates it. Is this manageable? Is this uncertain? Is this potentially threatening? If the task feels manageable, engagement is easy. But if the task feels uncertain, complex, or pressured, the brain becomes cautious. And when caution increases, motivation disappears. Most people think motivation comes first, then action follows. But psychologically, the sequence is often the opposite. Action frequently creates motivation. Small progress signals safety to the brain. The brain sees that task is manageable, and once that happens, engagement increases. This is why people often say things like, I wasn't motivated to start, but once I got going, it was fine. The problem is that many tasks feel too large or too uncertain to create that initial progress, so the brain hesitates, and hesitation becomes procrastination. There's another factor that makes motivation disappear: pressure. When expectations become high, when stakes feel important, when deadlines are approaching, the brain begins to interpret the work differently. So instead of seeing the task as something to explore or attempt, it becomes something that must be done perfectly. And that changes the emotional experience of the work. Uncertainty increases, fear of mistakes increases, and suddenly starting feels risky. When that happens, productivity systems that rely on discipline begin to fail, because discipline doesn't remove the pressure signal, it often amplifies it. I've made a full video explaining why stress often makes people procrastinate more, not less. I'll link that up here and in the description if you'd like to explore that idea further. If motivation disappears under pressure, what restores it? The answer is surprisingly simple: safety. When the brain perceives a task as manageable, motivation returns naturally, not because you forced it, but because the nervous system no longer sees the task as threatening. This is why some days productivity feels easy, the work feels clear, expectations feel reasonable, progress feels possible. And when those conditions are present, the brain becomes willing to engage. So the goal is not forcing productivity. The goal is creating conditions where motivation can appear naturally. One of the simplest ways to do this is by shrinking the entry point into the work. Large tasks often feel intimidating because the brain can't see the full path forward. But when the entry point becomes small, the brain becomes more willing to start. Instead of asking, how do I finish this project? You ask, what is the smallest useful interaction with this task I can make? Open the document, write one sentence, sketch an outline. These small actions reduce uncertainty, and once uncertainty drops, the brain relaxes. Momentum often appears after that, very naturally. If you want to understand why shrinking tasks can dramatically reduce procrastination, I've explained that in a video about micro missions, which I'll link up here in the pop-out banner and in the description. Another major reason people struggle with productivity is cognitive overload. Your brain is constantly trying to track unfinished tasks, emails, deadlines, decisions, plans. Each of these creates an open loop in the mind, and when too many open loops accumulate, clarity disappears. The brain struggles to prioritize, focus becomes fragmented, and motivation drops. So one of the most effective ways to become more productive is simply to reduce cognitive load, externalize tasks, clarify what actually matters today, remove the unnecessary decisions. When mental load drops, the brain suddenly becomes capable of focusing again. The final piece of the puzzle is pressure. If every task feels like a test of your ability, the brain becomes cautious. But when expectations become realistic, something interesting happens. The brain relaxes. You become willing to experiment. And experimentation creates progress. Progress creates motivation. And motivation creates productivity. Which means the fastest way to become more productive is often to lower the pressure around the work. Not remove responsibility, but remove the emotional weight that turns work into a threat. So if you want to become more productive and motivated without forcing yourself, the shift is this. Stop trying to overpower your brain. Start designing work in a way that your brain can actually engage with. Shrink the entry point, reduce cognitive load, lower unnecessary pressure. When those conditions are present, productivity becomes much easier to sustain. Not because you pushed harder, but because the brain is finally willing to participate. I explain much more of this inside the Momentum Reset method. You can check that out. There's a link in the description. If this helped you understand how to be more productive and motivated without forcing yourself, the next video I recommend watching is Why Your Nervous System Resists Important Work. That video explains the deeper biology behind why resistance appears in the first place. I've linked it on screen now. You can also explore the full procrastination psychology playlist where I break down the hidden causes of procrastination and how to build momentum without relying on pressure or discipline. And if you'd like more videos like this explaining productivity through psychology rather than forcing motivation, consider subscribing to the channel. I would love that, because once you understand how the brain actually works, productivity becomes much easier to build.